The studio lights burned hot as the conversation drifted from policy into something sharper, something that hummed beneath the surface long before anyone named it. Jasmine Crockett sat upright at the curved table, hands folded at first, listening with the stillness of someone who had already decided she wouldn't let the moment slide. The discussion had started where it always did, measured questions, familiar talking points, the kind of polished back and forth that made live television feel almost safe. But safety evaporated quickly when Crockett challenged a remark that had been tossed out casually, almost dismissively, as if the weight of it didn't matter. She spoke calmly at first, her voice even, deliberate, choosing words that sounded rehearsed only because she had practiced this restraint so many times before. She cited lived experience, the reality behind the headline, the human cost that got flattened into talking points. A few audience members nodded. One of the co-hosts shifted in her chair. Whoopi Goldberg leaned back, arms crossing loosely, a half-smile tugging at her lips as if to say she'd heard this argument 100 times. That smile was the spark. Whoopi interrupted with a quip, the kind that usually drew laughter and reset the room. It landed unevenly this time. Crockett paused, then continued, politely but firmly reclaiming her sentence. Her eyes stayed locked forward, not aggressive, just unyielding. The studio felt warmer somehow, the air thicker. Producers behind the cameras exchanged quick looks. This wasn't following the usual rhythm. Whoopi leaned forward now, her smile gone. She pushed back harder, her voice rising, not shouting but unmistakably sharper. She framed her point broadly, from a place of cultural authority, from decades of commentary and experience. The audience reacted with a low murmur, that collective intake of breath that signals something unscripted is happening. Crockett nodded once, as if acknowledging the weight of Whoopi's presence, and then challenged it directly. "That's exactly the problem," she said, her tone steady but charged. "When experience becomes a shield against accountability." The word accountability seemed to echo. One of the co-hosts attempted to jump in, laughing lightly, suggesting they take a quick break. The suggestion floated and fell. Whoopi waved it off, eyes fixed on Crockett. She spoke again, louder now, asserting control, reminding everyone, implicitly, whose table this was. Crockett responded without raising her voice, which somehow made her words land harder. She leaned in slightly, palms flat on the table, and laid out her argument piece by piece, refusing to be rushed, refusing to be talked over. The audience grew quiet. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Whoopi cut her off mid-sentence. Crockett didn't stop. They spoke at the same time, voices colliding, neither yielding. The sound was messy, raw, nothing like the smooth television debates viewers were used to. A producer's voice crackled faintly through an earpiece, urging a reset, urging calm. One of the co-hosts placed a hand gently on Whoopi's arm. Whoopi shrugged it off. "This isn't how we do this," Whoopi said sharply. "This is exactly how it happens," Crockett shot back, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the frustration beneath. "People get shut down the moment they make someone uncomfortable." That word, uncomfortable, shifted the energy again. Whoopi stood abruptly, chair legs scraping against the floor, the sound cutting through the studio like a warning bell. Gasps rippled through the audience. She gestured toward the wings, her arms slicing through the air, signaling that the conversation was over, that the line had been crossed. Crockett looked up at her, unflinching. For a split second, the cameras caught it all, the power imbalance, the generational divide, the clash of two women unwilling to back down. Crockett rose slowly, deliberately, as if refusing to give the moment the satisfaction of haste. She straightened her jacket, the small, human gesture grounding her as the room buzzed with tension. "I came here to have an honest conversation," she said, not loudly, but with enough force to carry. "If honesty isn't welcome, then say that." The silence that followed was heavy, almost physical. The director hesitated, then cut to a wide shot. Crockett stepped away from the table, the scrape of her chair echoing louder than it should have, each step toward the exit punctuated by whispers and the faint hum of equipment. Whoopi remained standing, jaw tight, eyes following her, anger and disbelief flickering across her face. As Crockett reached the edge of the set, she paused, turning just enough to offer one last look, not defiant, not apologetic, just resolute. The cameras cut away as she disappeared backstage, leaving behind a stunned audience and a table that suddenly felt far too empty. The show would go on, of course. It always did, but the moment had already fractured the carefully maintained illusion, exposing something raw and unresolved, hanging in the air long after the lights dimmed. Backstage, the roar of the studio dissolved into a low, anxious hum, the kind that filled hallways after something went wrong live on air. Jasmine Crockett walked past racks of costumes and rolling cameras, her heels clicking against the floor in a steady rhythm that betrayed none of the adrenaline surging through her chest. A production assistant hovered nearby, unsure whether to speak. Crockett stopped near a blank wall plastered with old show posters and exhaled slowly, pressing her palms together as if grounding herself. She replayed the exchange in her mind, every interruption, every half-finished sentence. She wondered whether she could have softened a word, paused a second longer, let someone else steer the conversation. The thought passed quickly. She had come prepared for disagreement, not dismissal. And that distinction mattered. On set, the cameras found Whoopi Goldberg again as she lowered herself back into her chair. The room felt off balance, like a table missing a leg. Whoopi's expression was tight, her usual ease replaced by something brittle. One of the co-hosts leaned in, voice gentle but urgent, suggesting they pivot, move on, reset the energy. Whoopi nodded once, though her eyes still burned with frustration. She addressed the audience directly, her tone controlled but defensive, framing the moment as a breakdown in respect rather than a breakdown in listening. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then louder, as if the audience wasn't sure what they were clapping for: closure, loyalty, or simply the relief that the tension had a place to land. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled. Phones buzzed. Clips were already circulating online, captions forming narratives faster than anyone could intervene. Some staff members argued quietly about whether the segment should have been cut sooner, whether the intervention had come too late. Others stared at monitors, watching the exchange replay on a loop, wincing at each overlap of voices. Crockett finally took a seat in a small green room, the kind meant for quick touch-ups and brief resets, not emotional fallout. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, makeup still intact, eyes bright with unshed emotion. Her phone vibrated. Messages poured in, supportive, furious, grateful, condemning, often all from the same person. She didn't respond. Not yet. She knew anything she said now would be dissected, amplified, weaponized. A senior producer stepped in, cautiously, offering water, murmuring something about how live television was unpredictable, how everyone was passionate. Crockett listened politely, nodded, thanked them, but said little. The words sounded rehearsed, a bomb meant to smooth over something that had cut too deep to heal quickly. Out on the set, the show wrapped, credits rolling over a forced sense of normalcy. Whoopi remained seated even after the cameras stopped, hands folded, staring at the table. For a moment, she looked tired rather than angry. A crew member asked if she needed anything. She shook her head. The room cleared slowly, leaving her alone with the echo of her own words. By the time Crockett left the building, the story had already grown legs. Headlines framed it as a meltdown, a power struggle, a culture clash. Short clips stripped of context traveled faster than full recordings. Commentators took sides. Some praised Whoopi for protecting the integrity of the show. Others hailed Crockett for refusing to be silenced. The truth, messy and layered, lived somewhere in between, but nuance struggled to survive in the noise. Crockett paused outside, the cool air a shock after the heat of the studio. She pulled her coat tighter and looked up at the building, its glowing windows hiding the chaos inside. For a fleeting second, doubt crept in. Had she burned a bridge she didn't need to? Had the message been lost in the moment? Then she remembered the faces in the audience who had leaned forward, the ones who had nodded, the ones who had gone quiet not because they were bored, but because they were listening. Across town, Whoopi sat in her car longer than usual before heading home. The day replayed in fragments, the interruption, the pushback, the moment she stood up. She told herself she had done what she always did, what the job demanded. Still, a small, persistent thought lingered. When did control start to feel like defense? Neither woman spoke publicly that night. The silence itself became a statement, filling feeds with speculation. By morning, the cycle would begin again, apologies demanded, statements parsed, lessons proclaimed. But in those quiet hours, away from the lights and the cameras, both sat with the same uncomfortable truth. The argument had exposed something unresolved, something bigger than either of them, something that couldn't be edited out or ushered off stage. And that, more than the raised voices or abrupt exit, was what refused to fade.